Hannah Mears. I am here with a friend, a Penn State alum, Stephen Mezzacappa, aka Mez. And something we're all going through right now is a little bit of mental craziness. We don't know what the next step is sometime in such an unprecedented world and circumstances that are so poor. But Mez over here has done something incredible. He's written a book that sort of helps everyone channel these feelings and put a purpose to everything and not lose sight of your passion. The book is called Passion with a Purpose, and it was written by the man himself, Stephen Mezzacappa. So without further ado, welcome to Hear Them Out with Hannah Mears. How are you, Mez?
I'm awesome, Hannah. Thanks for having me. Pumped to be talking about the book with you and about the message. I think it's pretty relevant to now. My vision to write this book was several years before the pandemic even hit, but I think it's pretty relevant. And I think it's something I hope will bless people and give people some kind of vision and hope for their future, despite the impact of COVID, despite the impact of just everyday adversity.
Absolutely. I know I'm really excited to talk all about it and give people a little more insight as to what this book is about. But Steve, I think we need to go back just a little bit here. I need a little better of an introduction to who you are for everyone listening. So you went to Penn State and it was an engineering major, if I'm not
Correct.
mistaken. Okay,
Yep.
so engineering major. And this guy is freaking awesome. For anyone who doesn't know, he has won so many awards, including the 2016 New Faces of Engineering College Edition, which is the top 13 people in the nation who are the most promising future engineer leaders. So that one blew me away, but I know there's several other titles you hold as well. But when you were at Penn State, you created something that is sort of leading into the book title as well. So take me through your college years and how you ended up where you are now.
So I went to Penn State. I started in 2012. I was there for 5 years, a 5-year program for architectural engineering. And early on in my college career, I grew up, in Staten Island, New York, an old boys Catholic high school. I was surrounded by like party atmospheres, went to parties when I was in high school. But when I went to Penn State, it was big time, party culture, as a lot of people know. And I was kind of caught guard by that. And I didn't drink until I was 21. And I looked at the atmosphere and the culture, and one thing I wondered about was authenticity. I saw like this need for people to be authentic, and I was worried about people giving it to peer pressure in order to find community and friendship and fulfillment within themselves. So the idea of starting this club, it was as early as my freshman year. Like, how do I help people be authentic? And when you're authentic, in essence, you'll kind of develop and find what your passion is for your life, right? So fast forward a few years, I was involved in several organizations. One was called Bridges to Prosperity. Now it's called Engineers in Action. In this organization, we built pedestrian footbridges for communities abroad. Really amazing experience. And from that experience and from my experiences in the Penn State Dance Marathon, being operations captain, I developed like this catchphrase for myself of putting passion in action. Because how cool is it to do something you love and then do something that's going to end up serving others more than yourself? So that's where we started to build this idea of what passion is and how it could impact other people. So then come, I guess, like my third or fourth year, I started to play with names, and then the idea of passion with purpose came to mind for a club to start. And the idea was to help people find what they're passionate about and help them direct them to avenues and paths to put their passion in action and have a purpose with it, right? And I think in college, it's one of the best places to experiment with what you love to do. And there's so many different avenues to go, apply what you're passionate about. So I was, working on it, and then it got to a point, my fourth year, I was like, oh, where do I go with this? I don't know where to go. And I actually had an internship in Mexico, the last summer before my last year of school. And, my whole life, I've always dreamed of building skyscrapers on the world. It was always my dream. And I was in Mexico, living out my dream, and I was just completely unfulfilled, completely disappointed. And it ended up making me, it was like a traumatic experience. It kind of led me down a spiraling path into depression and just unsure where I was really heading with my life. And here I am, I'm like all passionate about life, and now I'm like depressed. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm going to do with my career. And it was really hard to wrestle with. When I came back to look at passion with purpose, I'm like, is this all bogus? Like, this is what I've been like, preaching on for the past couple of years at Penn State, living by this motto. But through that experience, and it was a tough year, my last year of school, but through that experience, my whole perception of passion changed. And that's what this book is all about, right? Because we're always told from a young age to follow our passion, right? And if we follow our passion, life is going to be great. You're going to be popular. You're going to be successful. You'll be wealthy. You're going to have all these things. but they leave out the fact of the matter that life could be really difficult, and that's okay. So, the biggest tension point in my book is really that you shouldn't follow your passion, but you should truly build your passion and experience it. Throughout the whole course of the book, it's really about not trying to search for meaning, but to really understand the meaning. I'll pause there and let you chime in.
I definitely want to specify and break this apart a little bit more because that's what the book does. You
Yeah.
talk about having passion with purpose, and you gave us a broad scheme of why you started a club, what you're hoping people get from it essentially, and where your thoughts were coming from. But now let's focus in on the book a little bit because you talk about in a video that you break it apart into three chapters.
3 parts.
Three parts. Okay, so
Yep.
not chapters, but three parts. The book is in three parts. Take me through each of those parts. Like, what's the one, not one thing in particular, but what's the message you want somebody to get from each of those three parts?
Yeah, the core. Oh, yeah, and it's hard because there's so many like little messages woven in through each chapter, and I get a kick out of it because I wonder if people will get some of the things I've like hidden within it. But
Mhm.
yeah, each part is like really intentionally laid out and separated, and the title for each part is really intentional as well too. And it's all kind of like rooted in my faith. And the first part is called fulfillment, living a life inspired by the great architect. And there's so many different various messages within there, but I'll give you like two for this one. So the first one, like I mentioned earlier, is that we shouldn't follow our passion, but we should experience passion. We should build passion. It's not something found, but something built, right? And when builders build things, they build from blueprints or drawings, right? And as we live our life, we have people telling us what the good life looks like. We have culture and society telling us what the good life is, right? But then, as a Christian, we have the Bible and we have what God says, right? And it's really trying to get people to open up their minds and decide for themselves which blueprint are they going to build their fulfilling life from, right? What culture says is the good life, or what the Word of God says is a fulfilling life, right? So it's really not about what you have, but it's about who you have. And actually, today, as I was walking to work, I was thinking of this quote. It was like, thinking about, we start the week off like, how could I have more of this? How could I have more success and more passion for what I do? Versus we should really be asking ourselves, how can I have more of the people around me? How could I give more? How could I love more? Right? Because really fulfillment really comes from relationships more than what we do. You could talk to a team that won a Super Bowl, and I'm sure they'd say, more than winning the game itself was really the camaraderie and teammates that they had playing that whole season with. I'm sure that really led to more fulfilling experience than actually winning the whole thing, right? Now, part two is intentionally titled, living a life encouraged by the great physician. And when I say encourage, it means giving us hope and giving us strength. And when I say the great physician, that's in reference to Jesus, right? In all of our lives, we experience emotional traumas. It could be bullying, it could be various things. And this part really goes into what happens if we experience emotional traumas in life and if they go undealt with and unhealed, right? It can almost spiral into what I would call like a soul infection. And you never know, you could experience something as a child, a traumatic event, and based on how you respond to that, it could dictate the dreams and paths you have for your life, right? But it really goes about this part really goes into detail on, how do you uncover some of those things in your life that could have hurt you, and how did you go through a healing process, and it's in that relationship with Jesus you can go walk through the healing and then uncover where it is that you're meant to go moving forward. Now, part three is where it gets interesting. This is where it goes out, right? Part one is about kind of like looking in and looking up and grounding yourself. Part two is about looking in, reflecting on where you've been, and now part three is looking out where you're going to go with that. And it's very much outward centered and going into have an impact in the world. And it might not be so simple as building a bridge in another country, right? It really brings down purpose and breaks it down to make people realize that you don't need to do some crazy big thing to have an impact. It's about just being obedient to the path you have in life. Are you authentic and honest with your peer? If you're on the bus, are you talking to someone and making them smile? Like, we don't need to have all these big glamorous things in life to have an impact. We don't need this massive platform to have an impact. I think if you're just authentic in yourself, you can really have that impact.
I think that's a wonderful message. And it's something that more than ever, I think I need to hear today. I need to hear every day as I'm going through a process of trying to find out where my passion is leading me, like what's my purpose. And that's just me being very transparent about like where I am and what stage of life I'm in. And it gets really easy to steer away from the path of loving what you do and just wanting to get somewhere where you feel like you're making that big impact, like you said. But you forget about the journey. And something that you said that made me just like think of this was, man, think about when you first found a passion for something. When you're little, maybe it's a sport you played, or you were really passionate about art or music. You were never getting a ton of attention for it. You were never getting paid for it. You didn't have people blowing up your phone telling you how amazing you were. You were doing it because you loved it and you were good at it. And so I think a lot of the times, what the things that you're talking about in your book would really help a lot of people center their thoughts again around, am I doing this because I love it, or am I doing it to get somewhere else? And I think then it doesn't become a passion anymore. It becomes just a thing you do. It becomes work. It's not something that you wake up loving to do every day. So I love how your book forces you, like it just did to me, whatever you're doing is working in this book, because just talking about it forced me to internally reflect about, like, what am I doing to like to focus my passion and have passion with a purpose. So wow, I think that makes me really excited to just dive into it deeper. If the fact you could make me reflect in the matter of a minute that you just talked, to really reflect that deep. And I hope a lot of people do get that from your book. And something I was really curious about when I was analyzing what the book was about, and just curious to pick your mind, you compared passion to different colors at one point. And I would just love to know a little bit more about that, because I was reading it and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So I think that's something everyone else would love to hear as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went there because I was just thinking about to bring this up as you were beautifully summarizing what I was talking about, because it's really about who we're letting in, right? So here are these colors, and it's really interesting because it's all metaphorically, right? There's a lot of neurons and some, I'm not no psychiatrist, no neuroscientist. There's so much going on here, and I actually talked about a neuroscientist in part one. Her name's Caroline Leaf. People don't know her; they should check her out, Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she talks a lot about the science of thought and what impacts it. And she was another big inspiration for some of the thoughts and words behind my book. So, I kind of narrow down to, passion is this fire within, right? Our soul on fire. And that's even like the subtitle of the book. It's like the fire within. It's probably one of the biggest themes. And I'm surprised I didn't even mention it when I was given the first, explanation of the whole book. But, I kind of break it down to having a red passion or a blue passion, right? And now when you think of fire, right, it's hot, it's contagious, it illuminates things, it draws attention to things. Sometimes it sterilizes and purifies, and sometimes it burns, right? And I think it's really interesting because, you could look at someone and it could be really enthusiastic, they could be really passionate, but only they'll know internally, am I burning red or burning blue? But what does that mean? So, how do I explain? So if you're burning red, for example, I kind of equate that as an unhealthy passion, right? And if it's burning blue, it's healthy, right? Think of blue as kind of water, it's cleansing, sterilizing, right? And the red can kind of be burning you. So I use the analogy and I try to use the colors to illustrate the difference so you could kind of assess the passion that you're living out for your life, right? Because again, passion is really an action. It's not something like a hobby that, it's this experience you're experiencing internally, and what's affecting it. What are you letting into your life, right? So a good example, we'll start with like a red passion, for example, right? And a good way to sum it up, it's just negative thoughts, negative feelings, and negative choices, right? What are the things in our external environment or our community that we're letting into our inner self, our inner thought life? What are we pondering about? What are we thinking about, right? So if you're thinking of negative things, you're having negative feelings like sadness, and beyond, and you're having bad habits, it's a poor passion, right? But it's really interesting though, because you could be someone, and I've been there, I was named the new face of civil engineering like years ago, but at that moment, despite that success that I was there, I was really burning red because I was using what I was passionate about as a form of coping. It was a coping mechanism. My parents were divorced when I was young, and I had dealt with some tough stuff growing up. And from a young age, I became so obsessed with accomplishment and success. So that what was motivating me was the success, because I feel like I needed to prove something to myself, right? So that's like a red passion. Whereas a blue passion is like you beautifully said earlier, like it's intrinsic to me. No one else knew what made me light up. And that's when you're burning blue, because it's important to you. It's external. It doesn't matter what other people think, right? Because if I'm motivated and I'm igniting my passion based on what others think, what happens the second they think negative of it? If I ground myself in other people's opinions, you can only get so far, right? And I like to say that the blue passion is sustainable. It's always going to help you endure the adversity you have, whereas the red passion is really a path to burnout, because you're just burning, you're just trying to get through. But what's fueling you? What are you truly grounded in? You know?
I think that's an awesome way to look at it. And it's an awesome way because it's so simple. And what I'm curious about with your book, because I'm sure you didn't just write it in a month. This has been a long process, and you still have a while to go to get everything out there, and the cover page established and publishing and all those details. But how did your thoughts change as you're writing the book based on how society was changing around you? Did your thoughts ever change because of some things with social media or how people perceive themselves in the world? Was that ever a thought while you were writing this book?
I think so, for sure. Yeah, and the journey for it's been something I've been really wanting to write for several years, and I think one of the hardest parts of writing a book has been really trying to get the most truest part of the book out, right? Because there's definitely those external factors, and I'll tell you, for one, I think, if I'm being transparent, the biggest struggle I've had is what tone I write this book in, right? Because there's definitely a lot of biblical truth behind a lot of the things, and I realize that's, for some, religion and faith could be really could make people feel a little sensitive and a little, drawn back from it. And it was hard. I was like, how much do I dial it up? Do I dial it back? But I'm like, if I dial it back, then I'm not really being true to myself, and it's not really fair, right? If I only wrote one book, and this is the book I have to be open, honest, and write it for what it is, because I've had, ideas of this book to apply to, the corporate world, which is completely neutral in tone. But the power of the book is really bringing more humanity to Christianity, right? I like to say that religion is man's attempt at connecting with God, and I grew up Catholic, and, my faith has always been important to me, but it took me 22 years of my life to realize that it's all about developing this relationship with God. That's really what it's all about. And I feel like that's something really missed in society. People look at religion as rules and, don't do this and do that, but you're missing the point. It's all about having a relationship with Jesus first. So that's really been the hardest part for me, is letting the outside world dictate the tone that I write this book in, right? Because if I really do make it more, and it's like, I don't want to push people away, right? But I want to be authentic and true to who I am, because the truths that I've learned, and I want to put out there. So it definitely has pushed me outside of my comfort zone, and that was the biggest thing that's delayed me writing it, was like, do I make it completely, like, secular, or do I make it completely Christian, or try to blend it? And I feel as though I'm still figuring out as I'm, finishing up a couple chapters and getting heavier into revisions.
Another question I have for you
Yeah.
about this book is, you said you're still going through revisions and everything like that. When did you start writing this book? And tell us where you are now and when the end is near.
Yeah. So it's an interesting process. So I like to say I started, like, literally, like, probably the week of graduation. I remember, like, writing, and it went through certain iterations, like, like the introduction I wrote, like, way back when. It's completely different now, but I feel like I kept trying to start writing it several years ago, right? And and I started my career in the Pocono Mountains for about a couple years, and I started right there. But I was going through the self-publishing process. There's this, it's called a self-publishing school, like Chandler Bolt. I was like, great, I'm going to enroll in this and teach yourself how to write a book and get going. But I'm such a procrastinator, and I'm going through a specific program now, and they refer to it as just being a deadline writer. So I like to tell myself I'm not a procrastinator, I'm just a deadline writer. But so I spent, like, past couple years trying to write it, and I just really wasn't getting anywhere, right? But chewing on these thoughts, and then during quarantine or so, probably say a couple months in, like May or June or so, one of my really good friends from Penn State, named Jess McCarter, she had posted on social media and Instagram writing a book. I'm like, Jess, oh my God, I'm so happy you're writing a book. Like, this is awesome. Like, tell me more about it. And she was like, well, Steve, like, it's like a young adult nonfiction novel. And I'm going through this program with a professor from Georgetown, and there's classes that walk you through the whole process. They give you editors. You just go through it's a free program. All you have to do is pay for the editor, and it coaches you through the whole process. And if your manuscript qualifies, then you go into the publishing phase, and it's a blend between, like, traditional and self-publishing. I'm like, this sounds exactly like what I need. And I started this program back in June, and it's called the Creators Institute. And it's just a Georgetown professor one day decided to start a class where like kids were going to come into the class and they're going to leave the class with a published book, which I think is amazing. You know, it's an amazing program.
Huh.
So it's really cool. So I started really heavily writing in June, and for about 3 to 4 months, it was writing a lot of research, and I would have a development editor, as what the program calls, and they review my stuff, my writing, and then I have until about, I think it was until October to put together my manuscript or so.
Mhm.
And then I got approved at the manuscript phase to continue. So right now I'm in the pre-order phase where like all the proceeds from, you know, people pre-ordering a book now cover the publishing costs. Typically, if you go to traditional publishing route, you know, you have to get a big time publisher to say, yeah, we'll publish it, which is really hard. And sometimes they'll give you money up front. Whereas if you go a self-publishing route, it's a lot of money you have to front ahead of time to pay for it, and it can be pretty pricey. So
Mhm.
they walk you through a whole pre-sale campaign where you pre-order a book to people, you know, family and friends. And when people pre-order a book, all those proceeds go to cover the publishing costs. And now I'm pretty much at the phase where I'm like about to wrap up my pre-sale campaign. I actually just got like my feedback from my acquiring editor today, who reviewed my manuscript, and I'll have until March to really finalize things. My mind, I have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of things to clean up. I have a lot of opportunities to really clean some things up and add some things in there. But that final piece is due March, and then between January to March, I'll go through the cover design, the layout of the book, you know, how I want to kind of design all of that, and then it officially publishes in the end of April. So it's going to come fast, you know. So
Yeah, but
yeah.
that's so exciting. And I think it's funny you kept talking about you're a procrastinator and then you enrolled in this program and it's like, and they want this, this, and this. So like it forces you to really be like, okay, if this is something I want to do, I'm gonna get it done. So I think that's really interesting too for anyone that wants to write a book. I guess Steve's your guy to go to and he can hook you up with the details onto where you can go to start your book. But
Sure.
yeah, like you said, that's a long time. It's a long time to process things and chew on thoughts. So, were you ever worried about, this is never gonna happen? Like, I'm never actually gonna get done. People aren't gonna like this. Like, did you ever want to quit on yourself and then realize the message of your book and be like, what am I mean quit on myself? What am I telling people
Yeah.
to do?
All of the above. I mean, it's a grind, you know, because I work full time, and there's a lot going on, and like everyone else, I'm dealing with the emotional weight of COVID, and you know, I live in a 1 bedroom apartment, and you know, I just had Thanksgiving with my dog and me, but we still had some turkey, so it's still good. But so it's there's a lot going on, and it's tough. And there were times where I'd be like wrestling so much, where I'm like, man, I wish I didn't even have this idea. This is just so tough, and like wanting to quit, you know. And I'm like, Steve, you better start listening to your own advice that you're writing about here, you know, to get myself going. But there are definitely times where I wanted to give up, even now, because I see the road ahead. There's still a lot of work to do. You know, it's one thing to write a book, but then to publish it, to revise it, you know, it's you know, I look at a computer all day at work, and I come home and look again. It's definitely challenging, you know. So there were definitely times, especially over the summer and even in the fall, leading up to the deadline where the first draft manuscript was due. I actually took a week off of work just to get away to work on it, because I just needed to like get into that space. So there was definitely, you know, adversity, and it was definitely challenging, you know. But I don't share this to make people nervous if they want to write a book. I really feel as though everyone has a story, and if they feel called to write a book, they should really do it, right? And I know that, I think the thing that keeps me going is I can't imagine not writing it, because it's been several years now where it keeps me up at night. You know, when people ask you like, what keeps you up at night? I'm like, what keeps you up at night is if I don't write this, and if I don't write it truly and authentically, you know, like it could be 50 years from now, and the message of this book, I feel like it needs to be put out there, because it's, in my mind, the message of this book, it's bigger than a book itself, you know. But that's how I feel, as though, you know, I was talking to Pastor Ron recently, and we were talking about callings in life, and one of the things he mentioned about when you feel called is like a sustained impression on one's soul, like, and it's sustained. That's one thing. It's not like, you know, sometimes, like, I'm an idea person. I get a lot of ideas all the time, right?
Mhm.
And you could get an idea, and it's like, oh, maybe this is what I'm meant to do, but it goes away, right? If something's consistent and it feels like it's a burden and you can't shake it, and it feels like if you walk down the street and it's just following you, chipping in your ear, like you should do that. Like that might be what we're called to do, but it doesn't mean that life's going to be easy. And I think that's a great part of this book, is it's all about building emotional intelligence, which I didn't really even go into detail yet. Building this mental grit within yourself, so that once you feel as though your calling for life is revealed to you, that you could walk it out and do it with a passion that doesn't burn out, and I tend to think of athletes a lot too sometimes, because I can only imagine the adversity that's dealt with on the road. The tensions of relationships, long distance relationships. There's a lot that goes on. A lot of people probably don't know about. And the idea is, if you can learn how to build passion within yourself, you can really walk out where you're called to do, right? You could experience seasons of loneliness and despair and anxiety, but that doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't what you're meant to do, right? It's learning how to build that mental grit and stamina. And I think I could go on and on, but there's a bigger message to the book than the book itself.
My biggest thing would be, because I'm sitting here spewing all this random stuff out right now because my brain's going in 100 different directions. What's the biggest thing that you want somebody to get from this book? All things aside, they're reading this book. If they can walk away with one thing, one message, what is like the ultimate thing you want people to know about you and the reason that you got them to read this book?
Yeah. Oof, there's so many. It's hard. I know it's funny. I'm going to answer based on what I feel presently. And I feel as though if I was asked this question tomorrow or the next day, it would be different each time. But in the moment, it's really about, I'm thinking of these words like empathy, compassion, vulnerability, impact and care. Because we all have a lot more impact in the world than we realize, right? Because when you think about it, us talking now, right, we're affecting one another's passion, whether it's making someone be self-reflective or believing in oneself. It matters, right? I always tell people, you don't need to be Tony Robbins to go change the world or impact someone's life. Maybe it's just listening, but the whole point is that when we're vulnerable and let the walls down, right, and we're intentional with our thoughts, our words, and our actions, we could either ignite passion within someone's life, or we could extinguish passion in one's life, right? We could inspire them to burn blue, or we could, inspire them to burn red, right? And that's where, and I'm surprised I didn't bring up these 3 words yet, but it's really inspire, encourage, and empower, and that's that's a little hint related to the parts, a little hidden message there. But the big thing is if, I'm kind of being overzealous with my time here with this question because I want to get deeper with it. But if I was to tell people, it's understanding that I'll bring it all into one sentence. I want people to understand that their thoughts, words, and actions can really inspire, encourage, and empower someone else to walk out what they're called to do. Like, we all have an impact. We're all related more than we realize, and we're all connected. So I'm excited. It's encouraging to hear you said about me glowing talking about it, because for the longest time I didn't really tell many people about this book. It was so vulnerable for me. I was insecure talking about it. If I'm being honest, because it was so deep, and I don't know if people are going to get it. But it's, as I write, I genuinely care about people, and one thing I love, I feel like people have so much potential. If someone told me they had to say they wanted to go do something, like, let's go make it happen. I played offensive line growing up my whole life, and I feel like I want to be that person. I just want to open up the lanes for people to walk out what they're called to do, right? We could be so hard on ourselves in so many different ways, but I really do feel like we're called to have immense impact in this life and love people,
I love it. I love everything that I've heard so far. And I'm really excited that you haven't talked a lot about it, because I think in the conversation that we just had, it made you really excited to tell me every little detail and all the inspirations. Cause I feel like when you're passionate about something, you want to talk about it a lot. But when you do talk about it a lot, you start to find yourself like summarizing it, because you're like, these people really, I don't know if they want to know. Like, I'm just going to tell them, but like in a brief way. So I'm excited that I'm one of the first people that got to really pick your brain about it, because I think I got a lot of raw emotion. My last question to you is, let people know where they can pre-order, when the book will be available, and just tell them a little bit more details on, if they want this book, where they can get it.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you wanted to pre-order it now, and the campaign is going to be live until December, probably another week or so. So I think December 21st. Perfect. And it might go a few days after that. So it's an Indiegogo campaign, right? So it's like a fundraising challenge. So all the money raised goes to proceeds to cover the funds of publishing the book. And I hit my minimum of $5,000, so I'll officially publish as a paperback. But if I get to $8,000, another 100 copies, I'll publish as a hardcover and also as an audiobook with my voice, which I'd be so pumped to do, because I would totally go off in between sentences and add more an audiobook. We'll save for another day. But if you did want to, pre-order it, it's on Indiegogo, and it's igg.me AT/passion with purpose. I'm sure we could probably link it or something.
Yes, I will put it down here for everyone to see and be able to go to as well in my editing process. But I really am interested as well. Everybody, please help him raise the money, because I think an audiobook where we're hearing Mez talk about it, he's reading and then he'll be like, maybe this was a clue, or, diving deeper. I think that's something a lot of authors should look into with that access, is reading the book, but also maybe giving a little summary of your thoughts, because it helps the reader, I think, would be able to feel like you're sitting in the room with them and they're being like, what the heck are you talking about? I got this out of it. So that could be a fun, interactive, different, modern way to get people back into reading books, period. Because I don't think we do enough of that. I sure don't. And I would love to do more of it. And I think Passion with the Purpose has inspired me to read a little bit more as well. So Mez, thank you so much for being on Hear Them Out with Hannah Mir.